Hey, what's going on, guys? Kitsune TCG here, back with another video. And today we're just going to kind of take a look at the first major event that we had post-February ban list. And this is going to be a, kind of Kashtira heavy format, and I think a lot of people were aware of that going into it. And this is just kind of the first look into, what that kind of format is going to look like. And I gotta admit, first impressions, it is gonna be a slog. I definitely didn't find tier limit format very fun. I know a lot of players were saying it was a very heavy skill format, but even just looking at something like Kashtira, which is more of just a kind of floodgate, kind of like shutting players down from even being able to play heavy format, which I think a lot of people would say is not a very necessarily skillful format. We still saw very skilled players. We saw a lot of top players do well at this event, so I don't really necessarily think that, a deck being heavy skilled means that, good players would be rewarded more in those kind of formats. So definitely kind of interesting just to see the first kind of event in this new format. Still see a lot of really good performances from players that were and still are really good. So just looking at it, I mean, the watching Kashtira just block out zone after zone, and if you just don't have a card like Nibiru, or if they don't happen to have locked out all of your spell and traps, something like evenly going second, it's gonna be a rough day. And just kind of seeing that really gave first impressions that probably not going to be a lot of fun, playing this format, especially if, you have to go up against a Kashtira player. But, just kind of looking at the recap, we definitely did see some representation for some other decks, and, some other decks did do well. So, I mean, it's not like it's a, you have to be playing Kashtira or else. But if you do happen to come up against them, it's probably not going to be a very fun match. Overall, in the top 8 teams, because we do not have all of the kind of data on top 16 yet, but in the top 16 we did have kind of an interesting standout. Pac and Cody were both on Naturia Runic, so definitely kind of an interesting deck. I wasn't familiar with that one prior to them saying that they were playing that, so I don't know if that was something that's been tested for a while, or if that's just something they were just kind of coming up with and they brought out. I'm sure they'll post their deck lists on that soon. But yeah, it was kind of an interesting, that was probably the only thing that we have seen in the top 16 so far that was different from, I think, what was expected. Going into it, the top 8, we had 11 Kashtira players. We had 7 branded decks. The third best represented would be Labyrinth. And then finally kind of rounding out the last 2 spots, we had a Sword Soul, and then we had a Sprite deck. And that Sprite deck was actually a Live Twin variant. So interesting to look at that, but also interesting, kind of got to keep it in mind that it is a 3v3 tournament. So, seeing something like a Sprite Live Twin or Sword Soul, it could be that those decks are very good and that they have a chance of doing well in the meta. It could also just be that, their teammates did kind of did help and kind of carry a little bit in that regard. We did get to see some footage of those decks on stream, and they did look very good, but again, until we have, if they post, individual records and whatnot, we obviously can only go off of teams, but it is something to kind of keep in your mind that it just could be that, their teammates kind of carried it a little bit more than those decks kind of showcase. The tournament did end up actually being won by a team of 3 Kashtira players, so the deck did get its first, YCS win in its first go. It actually almost lost to Ryan Yu's team, and they were on 2 branded, and then Ryan Yu himself was playing Labyrinth, so almost missed out there. But, I mean, if you saw the finals, you can definitely see that the feature match was not close, Game 1, Game 3, almost every zone was locked out, so you know, again, like I said, just kind of going back to it, it's going to be a little bit of an unfun, you know, format. So, but I mean, definitely something to kind of just look out for. So that was how the top 8 rounded out. And like I said, not too much information on the top 16 yet, but from what I've seen, from what a lot of people have posted, and going into the format, what we knew, we definitely saw a lot of popular cards. Nibiru was definitely a very popular one going into the format, and it definitely showed that that was obviously a correct choice. We saw so many players not just even side decking it, but main decking it, you know, because obviously Kashtira was going to be a very well represented deck, so, you know, he had a pretty good, about 50-50 odds that you were going to either play Kashtira or something else, and Nibiru obviously hits a lot of decks, so main decking it I think is a very wise choice going into any kind of game, so I liked the idea behind that. Other decks or other cards we saw, then, you know, some of them, or most of them actually being in the case of being main decked, we saw Book of Eclipse, and because of that we did see a lot of Ash Blossom, which did obviously going to have some, you know, upcoming application, you know, hitting Brand Infusion, obviously hitting Book of Eclipse, which is a really big one, so definitely a card that, you know, if you don't have any copies of, definitely pick up, because it did definitely swing some games and definitely do very well. We had Triple Tactics Talent and Triple Tactics Thrust. Kind of an interesting little interaction there. And Billy Break was talking about it on stream that in the past, because one of the players did try to activate Tactics with their entire board locked out. In the past, we'd had a ruling on enemy controller where when you had 5 monsters face up, you attributed one using enemy controller to steal your opponent's monster, and then chaining to that Call of the Haunted to bring back the monster that you sent, so you had the 5 a full board again, and then on resolution, enemy controller sent the opponent's monster to grave by game effect, or game mechanic, because you didn't have anywhere to summon it to. So I see the similar ruling, but obviously with Tactics, you know, you don't have any available zones at the time of activation, so the judge ruled that that was not a valid activation. You can obviously check with your head judge if that's something that you are curious about for an event, but I think that's probably going to be a fairly consistent ruling, just because, you know, if you don't have anything you don't have a place to summon them to, it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to activate it versus, you know, just sending the opponent's monster to grave, so that is definitely something that, you know, you can ask. I mean, the card is still going to be played, you know, regardless of that ruling, so I guess it would be still kind of interesting to see what each head judge has to say about that. And then, obviously, with that Thrust, because, and the same thing why Talent's going to be so, you're going to see it so often, is because Kashtira does have Rise Heart's mandatory effect, so if you're able to activate, you know, one card, you're guaranteed to be able to activate Talent's Thrust. We did see another kind of situation with Thrust where player activates Thrust and is thinking on what to grab, and it's, you know, the opponent has a face-up Baron and they mention Tactics, but the commentators even made a comment saying, oh, you know, he's bringing up Tactics. He doesn't even play Tactics. So it was kind of interesting to see that, because I know we've had in the past a situation where a player mentioned that they, you know, brought certain tokens to try and insinuate that they were on a certain deck, and that actually got them in trouble with Konami, so kind of weird that we see, you know, kind of commentators being like, oh, haha, you know, like, he brings up a card that he's not even playing. It's like a mind game, when previously we've been, you know, seen an instance where, you know, you can't do something like that. So weird that that wasn't really called out on stream, but, you know, that's something that I saw happen over the weekend. And then finally, just some other cards that, you know, we either saw in side decks, you know, with Dimensional Barrier, just obviously with the top decks being Kashtira, an XYZ focused strategy, and Branded a fusion based strategy, and then, you know, some Sword Souls and stuff like that, you know, being Synchro. Dimensional Barrier is definitely going to be a mainstay in the side deck. And then finally, another one that we saw either in the side deck or for a lot of decks in the main deck would be Evenly Matched. And it's definitely easy to see why. You know, if you happen to go second, you definitely want to make sure that you have something. And with Kashtira not having really a single negate, a lot of the top players weren't playing any spell trap or negate or anything in addition to, you know, what they had. We did see some, you know, like adventure packages and whatnot, and some where they would go into a level 10 like Baron if they had the ability to, but it wasn't common enough that I think you have to worry about that too often. So playing something like Evenly Matched is definitely going to be, you know, something you definitely are going to get a lot of value of. So I thought it was a really, you know, smart decision. A lot of players kind of came in with a lot of heavy going second cards in their main deck just to be able to kind of play around and through things. So it was definitely a very interesting format. I'm interested to see how it plays out more, but already it's kind of already shaping up to be probably not the most player-friendly format. You know, you're pretty much going to have to be either playing the topped deck or, you know, actively kind of, you know, just main decking, side decking things to avoid that, because you're not going to really be able to play through it if you have every zone locked out. So I'm interested to see, you know, how future results kind of hold up and, you know, what we get out of that. But yeah, so I'm curious, you know, if you know, are you going to be playing Kashtira? Are you going to be taking a little bit of a break during this format? Or, you know, what exactly decks would you know, want to play this format? So let me know down in the comments. Definitely interested to see, you know, what a lot of people feel about this format, feel about the event overall, and we'll just kind of go from there. So I will see y'all next time.